the shocking truth behind the San Francisco Giants hiring Tony Vitello as their next manager. With him going directly from NCAA baseball to the major leagues, there are a ton of questions and even negatives about the hiring because of his lack of experience in professional baseball. We're going to break all of that down here on SF Giants Digest, so make sure to go down below, hit that subscribe button, as we will have every breaking news, report, rumor, acquisition, free agent signing. We will have all of that here on the channel broken down throughout the offseason, so make sure to hit subscribe below. But getting into this video, obviously Giants fans are extremely excited about this hire. Personally, I myself am very excited about the choice. I think it is the right choice because if you want to compete with teams like the Dodgers, the Padres, the Braves, the Phillies, the Blue Jays, the Tigers, if you want to be in the conversation for one of the best teams in baseball, you have to be willing to take a risk like this one. Buster Posey taking a huge swing in this decision, and I think it is the right one. However, with Giants fans so excited, they might be a little willing to forget or purposely forget the fact that he has no experience in Major League Baseball. Like it's been known across the baseball world throughout the last couple of days, this has never been done before. Pat Murphy, the current manager of the Brewers, was the head coach at the Arizona State University. However, he had, I think it's 10 to 15 years experience in pro ball before getting the job as the manager of the Brewers, including 8 years as the bench coach in Milwaukee. And then if you go to Dick Hauser all the way back in the day, he made the jump from Florida State University to become the skipper of the Yankees. However, he was the interim manager for the Yankees prior to his time at Florida State. He played Major League Baseball. So even then, all the way back then, this doesn't really apply. Tony Vitello is doing something that we literally have never seen before by making this jump. And there are a lot of questions being raised about what this means. What are we going to see from him in his first year as manager, through the first couple of years, really, because it is going to be such a transition for him. So a couple of questions have been raised. We're going to discuss all of that here. And getting into the first one, we are going to talk about what AJ Pierzynski, a former Giant, I'm not a very liked Giant if we're being honest, but a former Giant had to say about the hiring. This is a quote from him on Foul Territory. He said he's got to have veteran bench coach, veteran pitching coaches, guys that have been around. We've discussed that here. We did yesterday in the two prior videos where we talked about, the excitement around the hiring. We know that Buster Posey is going to have a say in who he brings on as the bench coaches. His coaching staff's going to be rounded out by, I'm sure, a number of guys that have experience in Major League Baseball, possibly even some former managers that have done this. So that lack of experience is kind of mediated. But he goes on to say, because if he just goes out and says, oh, I'm just going to bring my Tennessee staff over here, and they're like, hey, spring training starts next week, what's the plan? Oh, we'll just scrimmage every day like it is in college. That's not how it works. This is a fascinating hire, good or bad, however it works out. The last line is very true. This is a fascinating hire, however it works out. Buster Posey is trailblazing this. If it works out, he might start a new trend where Major League organizations, front offices, take a different route in looking for managers. They might go down to the college level. They might look at, who knows, maybe they go to the D2, D3 levels if a coach is really well regarded. This could change the way that baseball looks at the manager position for the rest of, the time, I guess. But the rest of this quote, I think, is a little exaggerated. Obviously, Tony Vitello is not just going to bring his entire Tennessee staff over to San Francisco, and I don't think Buster Posey would allow that to happen because of his lack of experience in pro ball. Buster Posey is a big, defender of college baseball. He himself is one of the greatest college baseball players ever. He was absolutely electric at Florida State University. But even he understands that you need a bit of experience in that dugout. You can't just throw 10 coaches who have never have any experience in Major League Baseball into a dugout and expect them to, perform well at the job. So he understands that, and I don't see any possible world where the Giants allow Tony Vitello to just bring his Tennessee staff over. And then I think he's obviously exaggerating when he says, oh, we'll just scrimmage every day like it is in college. Tony Vitello understands that you're not just going to scrimmage every day. There are a lot of people with the Giants who understand how a spring training works and who are going to help Tony Vitello through this first period of the job where he doesn't exactly know what to expect, but other people, he can lean on them to help. It's kind of similar to how Buster Posey was when he got the president of baseball operations job. He obviously had never done something like that, so he leaned on a lot of different people to learn from, to take, pieces of experience from, and I think that is similar here. Now, this is a valid question to say, how is Vitello going to perform in the spring training atmosphere? He's never had to go through spring training with the team. Obviously, when in college ball, you just show up the first day of practice and fall ball begins. You're practicing, you're scrimmage, all of this stuff. How does he build relationships with his players early on in spring training? It is a valid question to see if the Giants will be well prepared for the season under a coach that has never done a spring training. Now, another big question that I think is arguably the most important one is the in-game decisions. I think Tony Vitello will be fine in terms of building relationships with the players, the clubhouse atmosphere, stuff like that, which we'll get into towards the end of this video. But the in-game decisions are going to be the most important thing, and I think that is the biggest question that we will see answered early on in the 2026 season. In college baseball, you play 3 games a weekend, you have 2 midweeks for the most part. You basically have pitchers throwing, starters definitely throwing once a week, but bullpen arms basically have their set day for the weekend. Unless you're a closer or something like that, you might throw twice a weekend. But for the most part, you have kind of a set lineup of guys pitching for a weekend. It's a lot different in Major League Baseball, obviously. You have guys who might throw 2 or 3 weekends in a row. He's never managed a big league bullpen, obviously. And Bob Melvin was a guy who managing the bullpen was his biggest downfall. A lot of questionable times where he brought in a guy that should not have been in a certain situation, or left a guy in too long and then ended up getting hurt for it. So I think managing a bullpen is going to be a huge deal, him learning how to manage a big league bullpen. And then, of course, pinch hit situations, that's a bit easier to transition into, I think, because you're still pinch hitting guys in college baseball every game if you think it gives you a little bit of advantage. And I think University of Tennessee is obviously one of the best college baseball programs in the country. So they use analytics, they use all of that stuff, and he'll have even more in his hands now with being a professional baseball manager. So I think the pinch hitting thing won't be a huge question, but I think managing a big league bullpen will. Even using the challenge system, there's a bit of strategy there. How to use the ABS strike and ball system this upcoming season is the first year of that. So a couple of questions of in-game decisions, with I think the bullpen being the biggest one, but a couple of other ones about pinch hitting, the challenge system, balls and strikes, stuff like that I think he will have to transition into a little bit as well. And then another big one, a big talking point for people I've brought up is the schedule, the amount of games. These are the University of Tennessee Volunteers records over the last 3 years. You can see they've played, around 60, 65 games for the most part, some 75 games. So between 60 and 75 games for the most part that Tony Vitello has had to coach over the last couple of seasons. But it's a lot different in Major League Baseball, obviously. You're going from a 75-game schedule where you have breaks in between. I mean, like I said, you play 3 games a weekend and then you have midweeks, but there's days in between there where you can practice, you can look at film, go over stuff from the last game. You have days in between sometimes these games. Major League Baseball, you're playing 162 games, and for the most part on consecutive days. Yeah, you get a day off every 15 games or something like that, 10 to 15 games, however it is. But for the most part, you are playing a game 162 days in a row. Now, Tony Vitello is a guy who brings a ton of energy to the table. That's one of the things he's best known for. I said yesterday in the video here on my article for justbaseball.com, I said that Tony Vitello is basically the Drew Gilbert of managers. Brings a lot of energy every single day, but he's only had to do that over a 75-game schedule or sample per year. In Major League Baseball, he's going to have to bring that energy every day across 162 games. If he gets into the playoffs, even more possibly. So I think this is a big question. How does he transition from playing 60 to 75 games a season with breaks in between to 162 games a year, basically consecutively? So I think that is a big thing that a lot of people are not discussing as much as they should be. It's not the most important thing. Like I said, the in-game decisions will be very important, but this is something that I think we should be monitoring through the first couple of months of the season. Lastly, I think this goes pretty close with the in-game situations, but how does he deal with superstars? Obviously, we saw what happened with Rafael Devers in Boston. They treated him, let's say, not how he would have liked to be treated. didn't tell him that they were going to sign Alex Bregman, didn't tell him he wouldn't be playing third. They ended up asking him to DH, which he didn't want to at first. He ended up doing that. And they asked him to play first base, and he said no, and now he is, the first baseman for the San Francisco Giants. Crazy situation, all of that, but, that was a situation where the Boston Red Sox handled it very poorly, whether it was Alex Cora or Craig Breslow in the front office. Whoever decided to handle it that way, it was handled very poorly. Now, we know Buster Posey is not that type of guy. He's going to communicate very well. He's a player first front office guy, it seems like. And Tony Vitello seems like a player first coach. Hopefully, and I do see this being the case, but throughout his college career, Tony Vitello was a guy who was ride or die for his players. There's a lot of, if you want to go look on YouTube, Twitter, whatever you want to go check out, press conferences where he defended his guys, he spoke out for his guys, and I think that is something that a guy like Rafael Devers will very much appreciate. Willy Adames is a guy who I think will get along with the intensity, the charisma that Tony Vitello brings to the ballpark every day. Matt Chapman is another bit of a question mark just because he was such a big fan of Bob Melvin. He was very outspoken on the fact that he wanted to retire with the Giants, with Bob Melvin being his manager. He wanted to play for Bob Melvin for the rest of his career. So we'll see how he transitions from, what sounds like his favorite coach of all time, being let go, and a younger, a different type of personality of a coach being brought in for the Giants. So a lot of questions here. These guys make tens of millions of dollars a season, whereas in college baseball, Tony Vitello was the highest paid guy in the room, in the clubhouse. He was making $3 million a year, one of the highest paid college coaches of all time. He was making a ton of money. Now he's making $3.5 million a year, but now he's going to be one of the least paid guys in the clubhouse. These players, even bullpen guys making a couple million a year, he is nowhere near close to being the highest paid guy in the clubhouse in the room. So how does that change the way he handles players? Is he going to be able to get on guys like he did at Tennessee? It's not just 18 to 22-year-olds anymore. He's dealing with superstars. He's dealing with grown men. So that is another thing to monitor through this process, through the beginning of the 2026 season. There's a lot to follow here. Obviously, I've pointed out that I think this is a slam dunk hire. I think it is one that will end up working out for Buster Posey, Zach Minozzi in the front office, but there are a ton of question marks. It is very risky. It's a high risk, high reward hire. Like I said, this is something that the Giants need to do. They needed a change of direction. They needed a change of personalities at the head of the clubhouse. They needed this change. However, it comes with its risks. He has no experience in Major League Baseball. Could this blow up in Buster Posey's face? Absolutely. And it's crazy because it's actually a less risky move for Vitello. If this doesn't work out in, say, 3 years or whatever it is, he can go back to college baseball and kind of have his pick of the litter in terms of what job he wants to have. For the Giants, it's a bit riskier. They've had 2 manager changes in the last 3 years. Buster Posey really needed to get this hire right, and I think he did, but it will take a lot of time to see. Let me know down in the comments what you think of this hire. It's so out of the box. We've never seen something like this before. So let me know your thoughts on it down below, and make sure to subscribe to SF Giants Digest for further news.